The man who is trying to escape an interrogation room by kicking a hole in the wall after officers left him alone is Adlai Mestre, a 24-year-old son and brother in the Mestre family of Bernalillo County, New Mexico. In Adlai's shattered mind, his family ceased to be a sanctuary and became a battleground of hallucinations and paranoia. This video peels back the layers of Adlai's psyche through distinct phases, exposing how his illness destroyed him, turning a lost young man into an unwilling killer, and uncovering the deep-seated motives behind his violent actions. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Adlai lived in a world where reality and hallucination intertwined. Diagnosed with schizophrenia before September 2024, he heard invisible voices whispering commands to surrender to the police or take his own life. Despite treatment and discharge from a hospital deemed non-threatening, Adlai rejected his antipsychotic medication, discarding it into the trash as if casting away his own sanity. His mother, Nancy, discovered this betrayal, but her efforts to enforce his treatment only deepened the rift between them. In a home fraught with tension, conflicts with his teenage sister Bria, whose typical adolescent attitude sparked friction, became a fuse. His actions reflected this dissent. He withdrew from his family, ceased his medication, and even approached the police to inquire about his reality, as if seeking an escape from the nightmare within. The nascent motive was a growing delusion that his family posed a threat, fueled by quarrels with Brile and his mother's pressure. The voices in his head, though not yet clear, may have begun urging him to protect himself. Adlai was a young man imprisoned in his own mind, where every word from Brile and every glance from his mother twisted into a deadly plot. Schizophrenia stole not only his sleep, but his trust in those he loved, leaving him teetering on the edge of psychosis as darkness spread within. On October 13th, 2024, Adlai plunged into a tempest of psychosis where reality dissolved. In his mind, his family morphed from loved ones into enemies wielding knives and sledgehammers, storming his room to strike his heart. The invisible voices, perhaps the officer angel he later referenced, became irresistible commands, urging him to take up a gun. Adlai shot his father David in the arm, chest, and back of the head. His mother, Nancy, in the back, her body bearing marks of blunt force trauma, and his sister, Brile, in the eye, her hands and face scarred by violence. His rampage didn't end there. He killed a family dog as if the entire world were a threat. Afterward, Adlai dragged the bodies to the backyard to bury them, yet believed they were convulsing, foaming at the mouth, leaking black liquid, and that their wounds had healed. The primary motive was a paranoid delusion that his family intended to kill him, ignited by conflicts with Brile and his mother's insistence on medication. Hallucinatory commands, likely from the voices, turned this belief into a mandate for violence. Brile's teenage demeanor, though ordinary, was magnified into a conspiracy, while his mother's pressure fueled his agitation. A hallmark of schizophrenia, poor impulse control drove Adlai to act unrestrained, wielding multiple weapons in a frenzied outburst. Adlai was no longer himself. He was a puppet of his hallucinations, manipulated by unseen voices in a distorted reality where violence was his only path to survival. In the interrogation room, Adlai was a shadow trapped in a mental abyss. He rambled about seismic waves, cell towers, and the bloodline of Jesus, as if inhabiting a parallel universe. He communed with invisible entities, Officer Angel, revealing how religious hallucinations shaped his psyche. There was no remorse, no grief, only disjointed whispers and a vacant gaze. Adlai claimed his family attacked him, but the evidence, fatal wounds, no signs of self-defense, contradicted his words. His act of urinating in the corner and kicking through a wall to escape were the desperate cries of a mind no longer in command of itself. His behaviors were erratic, incoherent speech, conversing with phantoms, urinating in the room, and a fleeting escape attempt, only to be swiftly recaptured. Adlai was a lost soul in a labyrinth of hallucinations. His mind could no longer discern right from wrong, reality from illusion. He felt no sorrow, not out of callousness, but because his illness had stripped away his ability to connect with the world. Kicking through the wall was a frantic bid to flee, not just from the police, but from the nightmare raging inside his head. In the holding cell, Adlai was imprisoned not only by iron bars, but by his own disease. Though details of his behavior are scarce, his psychotic state likely persisted, with unseen voices whispering of threats or divine missions. Without medical treatment, his condition risked deteriorating, carrying the potential for self-harm or future violence. Adlai had no chance to confront the grief of his surviving sister, Nancy Jr., or to grasp the devastation he had wrought. In his mind, he might still be a victim of an unseen conspiracy, locked away by enemies that didn't exist. He likely continued to ramble, commune with hallucinations, or exhibit erratic behavior, reflecting an uncontrolled mental state. His isolation was driven by paranoia, with a belief that the police or justice system were threats. Unaware of the legal consequences, Adlai probably didn't comprehend the gravity of facing murder charges and other offenses. Adlai was a ghost in his own life. Schizophrenia had stolen his family, his freedom, and his very self. He was confined not just in a cell, but in a warped reality where the voices were his only companions. Adlai's tragedy lies in never having the chance to awaken from this nightmare. Adlai's actions paint a portrait of chaos and collapse. He used a gun, knife, and meat tenderizer to attack his family, not with calculated precision, but as a storm erupting from a psychotic mind. Killing the dog and dragging the bodies to the backyard showed an intent to conceal, but the disarray, leaving a chaotic crime scene, believing the bodies were convulsing, revealed a mind dominated by hallucinations and disordered thinking. During interrogation, his rambling, urinating, and escape attempt were the pleas of a man no longer in control. Adlai's motives were rooted in untreated schizophrenia, a paranoid delusion that his family sought to kill him, amplified by conflicts with Brielle and his mother's pressure, was the spark that ignited violence. Command hallucinations, possibly from voices like Officer Angel, turned this belief into a sacred mandate. Brielle's adolescent attitude and his mother's insistence on medication, though mundane stressors, were misconstrued as a deadly plot, triggering the psychotic tempest. Schizophrenia's erosion of emotional control drove Adlai to act on impulse, resulting in unrestrained brutality. Adlai Mestre was not a villain, but a victim of a mind ravaged by schizophrenia. From a lost young man, he became the architect of a tragedy, guided by delusions that his family were enemies and unseen voices were commands. His chaotic actions, from murder to escape and lack of remorse, reflect a mind no longer his own. Adlai's case is a heart-rending warning. When mental health is neglected, tragedy devastates not just a family, but an entire soul. To prevent nightmares like Adlai's from recurring, we must invest in mental health care, not only for patients, but for those living beside them in the shadows.